Welcome to our channel. Today we delve into the abyss of fear with 3 true stories that prove running out of gas can be a terrifying, even deadly mistake. These stories, sent in by viewers like you, explore the dark side of being stranded, the vulnerability of isolation, and the chilling reality that sometimes help is nowhere in sight. Make sure to stay till the end, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more horror stories. Let's begin. Our first story takes place under the unforgiving glare of the desert sun, miles and miles of sand stretching in every direction, baking under the intense heat. Imagine finding yourself stranded in this desolate landscape, the silence broken only by the wind whistling through the dunes. This is the nightmare that became a reality for one unfortunate traveler. He had been driving for hours, the monotony of the road lulling him into a false sense of security. He had ignored the gas gauge, its needle dipping dangerously low, too focused on reaching his destination. Then, it happened. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died, leaving him in stunned silence. He was stranded, miles from civilization, the nearest town nothing more than a dot on a map he'd hastily consulted hours ago. Panic began to set in, a cold dread creeping up his spine as the gravity of the situation sunk in. The sun beat down relentlessly, the heat radiating off the sand, making the air shimmer. He had a meager supply of water, a granola bar, and the clothes on his back. Hope, it seemed, was in short supply. Days turned into a desperate struggle for survival. The relentless sun sapped his energy, the scorching sand burned his skin. He rationed his water, each sip a precious commodity, but dehydration was a constant threat. The vastness of the desert mocked him, a desolate wasteland stretching endlessly towards the horizon. As darkness fell, the desert transformed into a chilling tableau. Gone was the oppressive heat, replaced by a bone-chilling cold that cut through his thin clothing. The silence was broken only by the howl of the wind, a mournful sound that echoed his growing despair. He huddled in his car, a meager shelter against the elements, fear his only companion. Days turned into nights, each one blurring into the next, a terrifying cycle of scorching days and freezing nights. His hope dwindled with each passing hour, replaced by a gnawing fear that he wouldn't make it out alive. He had become a prisoner of the desert, trapped in a desolate wasteland with no escape. One day, while stumbling through the sand, his vision blurred from dehydration. He spotted something in the distance. Was it a mirage, a cruel trick of his exhausted mind? As he stumbled closer, his heart pounding in his chest, he realized with a surge of hope, it was a road, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the desolate landscape. With renewed determination, he dragged his weary body towards the road, each step a victory against the relentless grip of the desert. As he finally reached the roadside, he collapsed, his body spent, his spirit broken but not extinguished. He had escaped the clutches of the desert, a survivor of a terrifying ordeal. His story serves as a chilling reminder of the unforgiving nature of the desert, a place where running out of gas can be a matter of life and death. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the will to survive even in the face of overwhelming odds. Our next story takes us from the desolate expanse of the desert to the claustrophobic darkness of a dense forest. Imagine the towering trees, their branches intertwined overhead, creating a canopy that blots out the moon and stars. The air is thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, a symphony of rustling leaves and the snapping of twigs. It's a place of eerie beauty, but also one that can hide unspeakable horrors. A young woman driving home from a late-night shift found herself lost on a deserted road cutting through the heart of such a forest. She had taken a wrong turn, lured off the main highway by a faulty GPS signal. Now, she was hopelessly lost, her phone showing no bars, her car sputtering its last breaths as it ran out of gas. The engine died, plunging her into an oppressive silence broken only by the sound of her own ragged breathing. Fear, cold and sharp, gripped her heart. The forest, once beautiful, now loomed around her, menacing and alive. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig, sounded like approaching footsteps. She knew staying in her car was her safest bet, but the silence of the forest was unbearable, a suffocating blanket of darkness pressing in on her. She turned on her hazard lights, their blinking a beacon of hope in the vast darkness, but the battery quickly drained, leaving her once again in darkness. Time crawled by, each minute an eternity. She dozed off, only to be jolted awake by nightmares fueled by her isolation and fear. The forest came alive with every gust of wind, the shadows seeming to dance and writhe, taking on menacing shapes in the darkness. Then she heard it, a low growl, deep and guttural, coming from the woods surrounding her car. Her blood ran cold, her heart pounding against her ribs like a drum. She strained to listen, her senses on high alert, every muscle in her body tense with fear. The growl came again, closer this time, followed by the distinct sound of heavy footsteps crunching on leaves. Something was out there, something big and dangerous, circling her car like a predator stalking its prey. She locked the doors, her fingers trembling as she fumbled with the lock. She huddled in the back seat, her eyes wide with terror, her breath catching in her throat. The growls continued throughout the night, each one sending shivers down her spine. She was trapped, hunted by an unseen terror in the heart of the forest. As dawn broke, the growls finally ceased, replaced by the chirping of birds, a jarring contrast to the nightmare she had just endured. She cautiously got out of the car, her legs shaky, her body trembling with exhaustion and terror. She didn't waste any time. With a desperate prayer, she started walking, her eyes scanning the dense undergrowth, her ears straining for any sound that might signal the return of her unseen tormentor. After what felt like an eternity, she stumbled out of the woods and onto a dirt road. A pickup truck soon approached, its driver stopping to help. She had escaped the clutches of the forest, but the terror of that night, the memory of the unseen growls, would forever haunt her dreams. Chapter 3. Our final story takes us to a desolate stretch of highway, a ribbon of cracked asphalt cutting through a barren landscape. This is not a road frequented by travelers. The few gas stations that dotted its length had long since been abandoned, their pumps dry, their windows boarded up, like hollow eyes staring out at the emptiness. A young couple, eager for a weekend getaway, found themselves stranded on this forgotten highway, their car sputtering its last as the gas gauge hit empty. They had ignored the warning signs, the lack of other cars, the eerie silence that hung heavy in the air, too caught up in their own excitement to heed the warning signs. Now, they were stranded. The sun beat down on the cracked asphalt, the air thick with the smell of dust and despair. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead. They were alone, utterly alone, in a place that felt forgotten by time. They decided to walk, hoping to find help, a glimmer of hope in this desolate landscape. Mile after mile they walked, the sun beating down on them relentlessly, their throats parched, their energy draining with each step. The highway stretched out before them, an endless ribbon of asphalt leading nowhere. As they walked, they noticed something strange. There were cars abandoned on the roadside, seemingly frozen in time. Some were old and rusted, others surprisingly new, their paint still gleaming under the harsh sun. Each car was eerily empty, their interiors undisturbed, as if their occupants had vanished into thin air. Fear, primal and instinctive, began to creep into their hearts. The silence of the highway was no longer just unnerving, it was oppressive, heavy with an unseen menace. They quickened their pace, their eyes darting nervously at the abandoned vehicles, their minds conjuring up terrifying scenarios. As dusk approached, casting long, eerie shadows across the highway, they stumbled upon a small town. Relief washed over them, a beacon of civilization in this desolate wasteland. But as they approached, their relief turned to horror. The town was deserted. Buildings stood empty, their windows dark and lifeless. The streets were eerily silent, not a single soul in sight. It was as if the entire town had simply vanished, leaving behind an unsettling silence that spoke volumes. They pressed on, desperation fueling their steps, their senses on high alert, their hearts pounding in their chests. The town was like a ghost town, frozen in time, its silence amplifying their growing fear. As darkness fell, they came to a crossroads. In the fading light, they saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. Relief flooded them, a glimmer of hope in this desolate landscape. They called out, but the figure remained motionless, its back to them. As they drew closer, their hearts sank. The figure was a scarecrow, its straw-stuffed body dressed in tattered clothing, its painted face twisted into a grotesque grin. It was a cruel joke, a symbol of their isolation and despair. They collapsed on the roadside, their bodies spent, their spirits broken. They were trapped in a nightmare, a desolate highway populated by abandoned cars and ghost towns. Their hope, once a flickering flame, now threatened to be extinguished by the overwhelming despair. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed these terrifying tales, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. And remember, always keep your gas tank full. You never know what might happen. The open road can be a beautiful thing, but as we've explored tonight, it can also be a place of unexpected danger and chilling encounters. These stories serve as a reminder that even the most routine journeys can take a terrifying turn, leaving us vulnerable and afraid. So the next time you're behind the wheel, remember these tales. Keep your gas tank full, stay aware of your surroundings, and never underestimate the importance of being prepared. Sweet dreams.